In the heart of North America, away from the bustling coastlines, lies Moss Landing. It is the kind of town that exists for the benefit of others. For 6 months of the year, it is a sleepy community of 3,000 people. For the other 6, it swells with tourists who come to escape the city and enjoy the massive artificial lake that the town was built around. This lake, formed decades ago by damming a river, is the lifeblood of the local economy. Houseboats drift lazily across its surface in the summer, and fishermen sit patiently on its banks at dawn. But lakes, especially man-made ones, have a long memory. They hold on to what is given to them. And for 20 years, the lake at Moss Landing held on to a terrible secret. A secret involving 2 17-year-old boys, a night of betrayal, and a body that was never recovered. The town moved on. The water healed over the surface. But the truth remained trapped in the depths, waiting for the day the water would finally retreat and give up its ghost. To understand the secret, one must go back to the summer of 2004. Caleb Turner and Liam Hayes were the definition of inseparable. They had grown up on the same street, learned to ride bikes together, and spent every summer vacation exploring the coves of the lake. They were a classic pair. Caleb was the charismatic risk-taker, the one who could charm anyone and always had a new scheme. Liam was the quieter one, the loyal follower who was content to be in his friend's orbit. That summer, however, a new element was introduced, a girl named Jessica. She was a tourist from the city, spending the season at her family's cabin. Liam fell for her hard. He was awkward and earnest, and to his surprise, Jessica seemed to like him. For a few weeks, it was idyllic. But Liam was blind to the glances exchanged when he wasn't around. Caleb, with his easy confidence and reckless charm, had always been the one who got what he wanted. And what he wanted, it seemed, was Jessica. The tension had been building for days, a silent current running beneath the surface of their friendship. Liam noticed the way Jessica laughed a little too hard at Caleb's jokes. He saw the texts on Caleb's phone late at night. On the night of August 14th, it finally boiled over. They had taken a small aluminum fishing boat out onto the lake, far from the lights of the shore. They were supposed to be night fishing, a tradition they both loved. Instead, they were sitting in silence, the air thick with unspoken accusations. Finally, Liam confronted him. The words spilled out, the betrayal, the disrespect, the years of always being second best to the golden boy. Caleb, dismissive and arrogant, didn't deny it. He laughed it off, telling Liam to relax, that it didn't mean anything. That laugh was the trigger. A shove was given. A punch was thrown. The boat, small and unstable, rocked violently in the dark water as the 2 17-year-olds fought. In the chaos of the struggle, neither of them saw the fishing line. A heavy-duty line, left tangled on the floor of the boat from a previous trip. During the fight, Liam stumbled backward, his foot catching in the coiled line. As he fell, he grabbed onto the side of the boat, but the damage was done. The line whipped through the air and wrapped around the spinning propeller of the small outboard motor, which was still running. With a sickening, high-pitched whine, the motor seized and died instantly. The sudden stop, combined with their frantic movements, threw the boat off balance. It tilted violently, water pouring over the low side. Liam had a split second to see the terror on Caleb's face before the darkness of the lake swallowed them both. The cold water was a shock to the system. Liam kicked and gasped, his lungs burning as he fought his way back to the surface. Liam broke through the surface, gasping for air. The world was dark and disorienting. The overturned hull of the boat was a black silhouette a few feet away. He could hear splashing. It was Caleb. He was panicking, his arms slapping the water desperately. Caleb was not a strong swimmer. In fact, he relied on Liam more than he ever admitted. "Liam! Help! I can't." His voice was cut off as he went under, then surfaced again, coughing and sputtering. In that moment, treading water in the cold, dark lake, something snapped in Liam. The fight, the betrayal, the years of being overshadowed, it all crystallized into a single, terrible thought. He remembered the laugh. He remembered Jessica. He looked at his best friend, who was drowning just a few yards away. And Liam made a choice. He didn't swim forward. He turned, and with a few powerful strokes, he swam toward the distant lights of the shore. The sounds followed him. The desperate cries for help, the thrashing of water, the gurgling gasps. They were the soundtrack to his swim. Liam didn't look back. He just kept swimming, his arms and legs moving on autopilot, his mind a blank void of terror and adrenaline. By the time his feet touched the muddy bottom near the shore, the sounds had stopped. He crawled onto the bank, collapsing in the mud, shivering uncontrollably. He lay there for what felt like hours, staring at the dark sky, waiting for a sound, a sign. There was nothing but the lapping of the water against the shore. Eventually, he got up. He walked back to town, his clothes dripping, his body bruised. He went straight to the sheriff's office. He told them a story. A story about a late-night fishing trip, a tragic accident. He said Caleb had lost his footing, fallen into the lake. He said he had tried to save him, diving again and again, but the water was too dark, and his friend was just gone. The investigation was swift but shallow. They found the overturned boat the next morning, drifting near the opposite shore. There was no body. The local sheriff, a man nearing retirement with little taste for complex mysteries, accepted Liam's story. Two kids goofing around on a boat at night, a tragic fall. It was an accident, plain and simple. The only person who refused to accept this was a young patrol officer named Frank Rowley. He looked at Liam, a scared, hollow-eyed teenager, and felt a knot of doubt in his stomach. Something was off. He questioned Liam repeatedly, but the boy's story never wavered. He questioned Jessica, who confirmed the tension between the two friends. But without a body, without a witness, and with no evidence of foul play, his hands were tied. The case was closed. The town mourned Caleb Turner, holding a memorial service without a coffin. And life, as it always does, moved on. Everyone except Frank Rowley. 20 years passed. Frank Rowley never forgot that case. It was the splinter in his mind that never worked its way out. It followed him through his career, a constant source of frustration. He became a detective, a good one, solving dozens of cases over the decades. But the disappearance of Caleb Turner remained the one that got away. He retired to a small cabin on the edge of the very same lake, a constant, silent reminder of his failure. He watched Liam Hayes grow up. Liam never left Moss Landing. He took over managing the local hotel, a quiet, solitary man who kept to himself. He never married, never had kids. He was a ghost haunting his own life. Sarah Turner, Caleb's younger sister, left town as soon as she could and never looked back. She built a successful life as an architect in Seattle, but the hole left by her brother's death was a void she carried with her always. Then came the drought. It started as a dry spring, which wasn't unusual. But the summer of 2024 brought a heat wave that broke records. Week after week of blistering sun with no rain. The lake, the lifeblood of Moss Landing, began to shrink. At first, it was just a wider band of gravelly shore. Then, the docks had to be extended further and further out to reach the water. Boats that were once floating were now sitting on dry land. By late summer, the water level had dropped by over 15 meters. The lake had receded so dramatically that it revealed a landscape no living person had ever seen: the old riverbed, the foundations of houses flooded decades ago, and the lost belongings of 1,000 forgotten summers. News crews arrived to film the eerie scene. It was an environmental curiosity, a sign of the changing climate. For Frank Rowley, it was an opportunity. He drove his old pickup truck down to the newly exposed mudflats almost every day. He walked the cracked earth, a solitary figure with a walking stick, scanning the debris. He was looking for something specific, though he didn't dare to hope. Then, one hazy afternoon, he found it. Half buried in the dried mud, its aluminum hull crumpled and rusted, was a small fishing boat. The paint was long gone, but the shape was unmistakable. His heart hammered in his chest. He approached it slowly, as if it were a wild animal that might startle. Using a stick, he pried open the compartment under the bow seat. Inside, nestled in a bed of dried silt, was a tangle of old fishing gear. And there, glinting faintly in the sun, was a rusty line cutter. The kind you wear on a belt. The kind a fisherman would use to cut heavy line. There were dark, rust-colored stains on the handle. It wasn't rust. Frank Rowley didn't call the current sheriff. Not yet. He carefully placed the line cutter in an evidence bag he always kept in his truck. Then he made a phone call to Seattle. Sarah Turner answered on the second ring. She listened in stunned silence as the old detective explained what he had found. 2 days later, she was back in Moss Landing for the first time in 2 decades. Standing on the dry lake bed, looking at the pitiful remains of the boat where her brother had taken his last breath, she felt a wave of grief and anger that time had done nothing to diminish. Frank showed her the line cutter. "This changes everything," he told her. "This wasn't on the evidence list from 20 years ago. It was in the boat, under the water, the whole time." They drove to the station together, where Frank requested a rushed analysis of the stains on the tool. The preliminary results came back fast. It was human blood. The discovery of the blood-stained line cutter forced the case to be reopened. They brought Liam Hayes in for questioning. He was now a man of 37, with a receding hairline and a permanent stoop to his shoulders. He walked into the interrogation room and saw Frank Rowley and Sarah Turner sitting across the table. He froze for a fraction of a second. Frank didn't start with accusations. He calmly laid out the new evidence. The boat. The line cutter. The blood. He described a new theory: the motor was jammed by a line, not by accident, but deliberately, in the heat of a fight. But the crucial piece was the psychology. Frank leaned forward. "The thing I could never figure out, Liam, was the silence. Caleb was a strong kid. If he fell in the water, he would have yelled for help. He would have fought. But you said you didn't hear him. You said you swam to shore. How far did you swim, Liam? Far enough that you couldn't hear your best friend calling for you?" The question hung in the stale air of the room. Liam stared at the table, his hands trembling slightly. Sarah watched him, her eyes burning with a mix of hatred and desperate curiosity. For 20 years, she had imagined 1,000 different scenarios. She needed to know the truth. When Liam finally spoke, his voice was a dry rasp. "He didn't fall," he whispered. The confession spilled out of him like poison from a wound. The fight, the boat tipping, the panic. And then the choice. The terrible, irreversible choice to swim away. He described floating in the water, listening to Caleb scream for help until the screams turned to gurgles, and then silence. He confessed that he hadn't just let him die, he had wanted him to. Liam Hayes was arrested and charged with second-degree murder. The town of Moss Landing was shattered by the revelation. As for Frank Rowley, he finally found the peace that had eluded him for 2 decades. He stood on the shore of the shrunken lake, looking out at the water that had finally given up its secret, and felt the weight of the unsolved case lift from his shoulders at last.